I want to welcome all of y'all to the press conference here at the Justice Center. And the first thing I want to do, though, is I want to, everybody in the room here, we're going to have a moment of silence for the victim of a 1988 murder, Karen Lane, in Cordova, and a moment of silence for her family. Tonight, hopefully, justice will be rendered for the killer of her down at Atmore, as hopefully the death sentence that was handed out for the first time in Walker County history in about 50 years when it happened occurs tonight. So I want to have a moment of silence for her and her family. Okay, thank y'all. I want to start off and introduce myself and the people that are here with me. I'm Bill Adair, the District Attorney for the 14th Judicial Circuit. Over to my right is Chief Alan Benefield of Alabama Peace Officers Standards and Training Commission. Also with him is his Assistant Chief for A-Post is Neil Tu to my left. The chairman of that commission is Sheriff Jimmy Abbott, who is seated just to the right of Mr. Benefield. And as chairman, he is the sheriff, just to let you know, of Tallapoosa County, and he's been sheriff for over 30 years in Tallapoosa County, and he is the chairman of the commission. Also to my left is Kathy Stewart. She's the lead investigator for the commission that started this investigation of this matter. Also to my far right is Thomas Govan. He's an Assistant Attorney General for the state of Alabama, and I want to thank his boss, who's Mr. Steve Marshall, for allowing him to be here, as the Attorney General will assist me in prosecuting this case. Now, before going over the substance of the announcement, which are the findings of the Walker County Grand Jury, I want to make a few preliminary remarks. 2.5 years ago, the death of Tony Mitchell in the Walker County Jail triggered a response from my office to begin an investigation into the circumstances of his unlawful death. After the initial few days of my office investigating this matter by interviewing both expert witnesses and event witnesses, and because of the vitiation and occlusion of the investigation, me and my staff concluded that we needed assistance from the FBI and the Department of Justice. Since that time, my office and the federal authorities have been working in a cooperative effort to fully investigate this situation. Now, I want to make this very clear to all the media here and for the citizens of our county. I fully support the Department of Justice and the FBI in their investigation of that matter. As matters have arisen, both the DOJ and the FBI and my office have consulted about actions that needed to occur in the Tony Mitchell case and on other matters, not just those, but other matters. That is the case on today's announcement. The Department of Justice and the FBI have been consulting and have full knowledge of this investigation and the charges that the grand jury brought. The Office of Attorney General has also been consulted. Ms. Clark Morris, who's the head of their white-collar division with the Attorney General, and Mr. Steve Marshall have been consulted and will be working with my office, as I said earlier, in the prosecution of this matter. In addition, and I want this basically for the people of our county, there's been matters that has received a lot of attention in our community recently. As complaints arise on any matter that could be criminal in nature, my office consults with the appropriate investigative agencies, whether they be state, federal, or professional responsibility agencies. That occurs in conjunction with decisions made on the status of the evidence and the applicable law in those situations. And to make it very clear that with my office, there is no good old boy system. When those complaints come in, we get in touch with the agencies that are supposed to investigate those matters. And that has happened on matters recently that have been in the news or on social media. Now, secondly, I had questions from several of you a few weeks ago, some of y'all that I see here, concerning court filings and my position on those court filings. I don't play the social media game, and it was not appropriate at that time for me to comment on those matters. But let me make this very clear. In my office, no assistant DA, nobody else makes decisions on those matters. I make the decision on those matters. And I made a decision in that matter, not an assistant district attorney. The motion that was the subject of some of y'all's questions and was mooted by me only after the sheriff's office complied. They had not complied only till later that afternoon, that day. And only after that did I moot that motion. Now, there's been a lot of discussions recently that I have followed, even though I don't really like to get into the social media situation. And I'm not really going to comment on some of that because I think it is very obvious from everybody here and from the things that have led up to today that there is no local politics going on in this. I think everybody can see that, all right? But I want to preface my remarks with every defendant is presumed innocent until proven guilty or by a plea. The May term of the Walker County Grand Jury has returned 2 indictments. The first is a 6-count indictment of Sheriff Nick Smith in violation of Title 36-2150 of the Code of Alabama as it relates to the appointing of non-APOS certified law enforcement officials to a position of deputy sheriff. And the key word there is appointment, okay, because that's in the law and that's a term of art. And appointing non-APOS certified law enforcement officers to the position of school resource officers in violation of the state of Alabama law, which requires SROs to be APOS certified. At the times of the alleged violations found by the grand jury, these crimes were misdemeanors. I think Mr. Benefield is going to go over that with y'all shortly about how that may change in the future. Violations of this statute carry the potential punishment of not more than 3 months for each count and a possible fine up to $500. Okay? The second indictment returned by the May term of the Walker County Grand Jury is a 1-count violation of Title 36-2150 of the Code of Alabama against Chief Deputy Ralph Williams. This case relates to Chief Deputy violating the Alabama Peace Officers Standards and Training Commission Administrative Code 650X 2.05, i.e. that he provided false and misleading information in responses to the APOS certification of Mr. Nevis McDonald. Again, at the time that this was alleged to have occurred by the grand jury, this crime would be a Class C misdemeanor and carry not more than 3 months up to a $500 fine on each count. And obviously with Mr. Williams, that's 1 count. Now, finally, the grand jury also made some recommendations and findings from this term. And this is actually signed by the foreman of the grand jury. And this was a unanimous vote of the grand jury. And I'm going to read those to you. Findings and recommendations of the May 2025 term of the grand jury for the 14th Judicial Circuit. After hearing from numerous witnesses and reviewing numerous documents, the grand jury makes the following findings and recommends the following actions. Number 1, A, that the school resource officer, commonly known as SRO program, is a valuable tool to ensure the safety of school campuses in Walker County and the city of Jasper. B, that a top priority for the success of these programs is having trained, qualified, and personally fit personnel of the highest quality around the most highly valued citizens, our children. C, the state of Alabama requires SROs to be Alabama Peace Officer Standards and Training Commission, commonly referred to as APOS, certified. So no law enforcement agency should appoint or assign a non-APOS qualified individual to school as an SRO. D, that the Walker County school system should modify its existing policies and procedures, and in the future, ensure any SRO have actual verified proof from the appointing agency that the SRO is qualified by APOS. Additionally, the grand jury encourages the Walker County school system to modify its existing policies and procedures, and in the future to not authorize payment to the Walker County Sheriff's Office for any SRO without proper APOS certification. E, it is also recommended that continuing law enforcement education for SROs shall be a top priority for both the schools and the appointing agencies. Okay, number 2, that was the first recommendation as it regards to SROs and that program in the school systems. Number 2, that if Walker County employees, including law enforcement, are employed under the civil service laws and regulations, that said agency should follow the civil service laws. The grand jury notes that law enforcement emergencies arise, but these exceptions should be very rare and thoroughly documented to the Civil Service Board when they occur. Number 3, that due to the number of recent arson charges attributed to e-cigarette misuse by inmates in the Walker County Jail, e-cigarettes pose a safety risk to the staff and inmates at the Walker County Jail. The grand jury recommends that e-cigarette sales to inmates at the Walker County Jail be discontinued and a safe alternative be substituted. And that is signed the grand jury foreman. Those are the recommendations from this term concerning those areas. Now, one final thing I'm going to say, and I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Benefield. The indictment with the sheriff has, the number was 6 counts. And I think that 3 of them are totally SRO. One of them's a combination on Mr. Harrison that has SRO and doing work as a deputy sheriff when not APOS certified. And then I think there's 2 on there that I think are totally doing deputy sheriff work and never were APOS certified, one of those being Nevis McDonald. So that is the indictment on Sheriff Smith. Now, at the end, I'm going to let Mr. Benefield get up because he has several things he would like to say. I will take limited questions at the end when after Mr. Benefield is finished. I am limited by the state bar on a lot of things I can go into with the facts of this case, but I will try to take some limited questions there at the end. Okay, Mr. Benefield?
Thank you, Mr. Adair. I'm Alan Benefield. I'm the Executive Secretary of the Alabama Peace Officer Standards and Training Commission. And I've got a news release that I'm going to share with you in just a second and explain how we came to Walker County in the first place. Nobody invited us or asked us to come up here. It all started with an application process for Mr. Neves McDonald. The commission and its staff are responsible for ensuring that law enforcement officers are trained and certified and meet all of the requirements required by law, that they be properly vetted. And that's really what we do. In addition, the other side of what we do is that we operate all of the law enforcement training academies around the state, either directly or through an agency, such as the Birmingham Police Department, the Montgomery Police Department. Each have their own departmental academies which are licensed by the commission to operate, and the directors have to be approved by the commission. Other academies, such as the one in Tuscaloosa or the one over in Jacksonville and Baldwin, are actually totally operated by the commission. So we provide training and we provide standards and the application process. And that's how we came to Walker County. We received an application for a law enforcement certification from Walker County Sheriff Nick Smith for Andrew James Nevis McDonald. And when the staff processed that, they revealed on June the 27th of 2024, Mr. McDonald was hired as a Walker County Deputy Sheriff by Sheriff Smith. He immediately began working as a Deputy Sheriff, wearing a Deputy Sheriff's uniform, driving a Sheriff's patrol car, equipped with blue lights, making arrests, answering law enforcement calls for service, and performing other law enforcement related duties that are restricted to law enforcement officers. And remembering that the definition of a law enforcement officer is a person who in their official capacity have the power of arrest. And the statute also specifically identifies deputy sheriffs, state troopers, police officers in that category, but it includes anyone that falls into that category of being official with the power of arrest. Mr. Nevis McDonald is not a certified law enforcement officer in Alabama. Additionally, the investigation showed that he worked in Walker County schools with a law enforcement trained K-9. The employment of law enforcement officers in Alabama is required by law, as I just said, to be reported to the Commission, and that report must occur within 10 days for officers who are already certified, and immediately if that individual is not certified. Walker County Sheriff's Office reported that Nevis McDonald's employment to the Commission in the state computer system on July the 19th of 24. It was not until October the 3rd of 24 that the Sheriff's Office submitted Nevis McDonald's application packet to the Commission with a request from Sheriff Smith that Nevis McDonald be granted a waiver of training for lateral entry into Alabama, as he was reportedly certified in the state of Arizona. And there is a process that if you're properly certified in another state and that certification's in good standing and you're not suspended or revoked or not in good standing in any other way, then there is a process by which you can apply. They applied. But when the Commission staff received and began processing of the application, they discovered that Mr. Nevis McDonald's Arizona Law Enforcement Officer certification is suspended and that he's listed in the National Law Enforcement Decertification Index by the Arizona Peace Officer Standard and Training. A review of his Arizona Post records reflected that he was suspended by Arizona Post following an investigation of a complaint of excessive use of force while he assisted in an arrest while employed with the Gilbert, Arizona Police Department. The APOS Commission, after reviewing all of the information available from Arizona, including video footage and other documents from the Arizona Post, the Alabama Commission ruled unanimously on February the 27th of 2025 that Nevis McDonald is ineligible for employment, appointment, or certification as a law enforcement officer in Alabama, and the Commission issued an order of ineligibility for Nevis McDonald. That order was sent to Sheriff Smith and to Nevis McDonald by certified mail, February the 28th of 2025. The order was later hand-delivered by our agents on March the 18th of 25, after the Commission learned that Nevis McDonald was still employed and working as a Walker County Deputy Sheriff. So I had our state agents come to Walker County and serve the sheriff and Nevis McDonald with a hand service of the order of his ineligibility. Investigators then received information and video evidence of Nevis McDonald continuing to work as a deputy the following night, March the 19th, in Curry High School, utilizing a K-9 that was specially trained for law enforcement purposes. The Walker County Sheriff's Office, through Chief Deputy Ralph Williams, twice reported to the Commission in the state's computer system, has an acronym called ALX, but it's a state computer system that tracks the employment, certification, training of law enforcement officers. Reported that Deputy Sheriff Nevis McDonald's employment as a law enforcement officer had been terminated. This investigation determined through the records with the Walker County Civil Service Board and the Walker County Commission that these reports were false. Following a March 27, 2025 letter from Sheriff Smith withdrawing the application for certification of Nevis McDonald, obviously after we'd already declared him ineligible, then Chief Deputy Williams reported Nevis McDonald law enforcement officer employment as terminated on March the 31st, 2025. That's how we got here. Had Nevis McDonald been terminated when the sheriff and McDonald were notified that he was ineligible and was not going to be certified in Alabama, we would never had to come to Walker County. But that might be a blessing, because what we did as commission investigators worked through the Nevis McDonald matter, they received information and subsequently discovered other individuals who were appointed and employed as deputy sheriffs who were not certified law enforcement officers. Several of these non-certified deputies were working in the Walker County school system as school resource officers. They were not certified law enforcement officers, which is in direct violation not only of Alabama Code Section 362146, which requires APO certification for any law enforcement officer, but also of Alabama Code Section 16-1-44.1 relating to school resource officers specifically. This statute requires all SROs be APO certified, that their certification be current and in good standing, along with other requirements relating to having had active shooter training and current firearms qualification. The non-certified individuals who Sheriff Smith appointed as SROs were stationed in school facilities at multiple campuses of the Walker County school system and had daily access to the students and faculty. School resource officers hold a unique and critical position of trust within our education system. They're expected not only to uphold the law, but they're also expected to build positive relationships with students, prevent threats, and ensure a safe environment of learning so that teachers can teach and students can learn. The grand jury of Walker County handed down the indictments which were just announced by District Attorney Adair, charging Sheriff Nick Smith with multiple offenses, including violating state certification requirements for law enforcement officers as required by the Alabama Peace Officer Standing Training Commission. The charges stem from the sheriff and the chief deputy's deliberate appointment of individuals who lack the legally required certification training and or eligibility to serve as a sworn law enforcement officer in Alabama, to serve as a school resource officer as required by state law, and for the false reporting of information to the APOS Commission, which is in violation, as Mr. Adair pointed out, that's in violation of the APOS Administrative Code, which carries the force of law. These indictments reflect the Commission's unwavering commitment to uphold the integrity of law enforcement in our state, the safety of our schools, and certainly no individual is above the law when deliberate decisions put the safety of our children, our school educators, and their staff at risk. Our children and our citizens deserve to be protected by trained, qualified, and properly vetted officers. The failure to ensure that every law enforcement officer and every SRO is properly trained and certified is not only a legal issue, it is a betrayal of the public trust and unacceptable lapse in public safety. Hopefully the citizens and schools of Walker County will be safer because of the efforts of Walker County District Attorney Bill Adair, the citizens of Walker County through their grand jury, and the Alabama Peace Officer Standing Training Commission. Now, this investigation remains ongoing, and administrative actions by the Commission may follow concerning retention of their Alabama law enforcement officer certification. It's highly unusual that we run into a situation like this where the agency head just absolutely refuses to follow the law. Most often, if there's any question or someone makes a mistake, it's cured right away. But obviously, as you see, that didn't happen here. And even when you've been hand-served with the notice, and that night, that officer who's ineligible is working in the county school system. That's wrong. So maybe this turned out to be a blessing in disguise, because what started out to be a person who was ineligible to transfer from Arizona to Alabama turned into be a situation that involves the health, welfare, and public safety of our children, teachers, and our school system, and the citizens. And I will tell you, many times, I have to compliment Bill Adair, because when Investigator Stewart and Capps came up first, and I told him, I said, when you get started, first thing you do is go by and see the DA. He may not want to fool with this. He wouldn't be the first one that didn't want to fool with it. But he shouldered his responsibilities. He did his job, what he was supposed to do. And he assisted them and issued subpoenas to get records hopefully in a timely manner. But we did that, and we didn't know how it would come out, but we just knew that we had to make that move to do what was right for law enforcement and what was right for the citizens of Walker County. So that's why we're here, and that's what we've done. I'll turn it back over to Bill.
Okay, I said I would take some limited questions. And again, I'll preface it with saying there's some of the facts, the bar does not allow me to go into a lot of the facts, but I'll try to answer what I can. Yes, yeah, yes, ma'am.
Are the remaining 5 men also removed from their positions, or do they continue to serve?
You talk about the ones that are named?
Yes.
Most of them, I think March, I forgot the exact date, but it was in March of this year. As I understand it, the sheriff made them turn in all their vehicles. I do not know if they are continuing on in some other capacity. I did speak to one of them, which said that they were serving process papers and were going to continue serving process papers. There was another one that I think was a dispatcher, and I don't know if he went back to dispatching or not.
And have any cases been impacted as a result of the men that were not certified serving in this role?
There will be cases that we're going to have to review, one of which is Mr. Harrison's case that got drugged and assaulted at Curry High School because he was not certified, and he's lucky to be alive today.
Will this in any way impact Sheriff Smith working as sheriff?
Under Alabama law, they just passed a law that deals with the sheriff in the capacity to be able to be sheriff. For a sheriff to be removed from office, he has to be convicted of a felony. If he becomes unable to serve because of an interest in a case, such as if he had to serve time or something like that, then the next person in charge, which would be the chief deputy, would take over. If the chief deputy is unable to take over because of the same kind of situation, then obviously it'd be whoever is third in command.
Are you concerned about the staffing levels now in the sheriff's office?
Yes.
Is there anything that would preclude the other 5 people of being ICO certified, any charges, any historical records, aside from Dennis McDonald?
I don't think so. Each one of them have a little different situation, okay? And without going into the facts, if you read the indictments very carefully, you can see that they're worded that some of them might have had one disqualification and others might have had another disqualification. Such as one of the things Mr. Benefield didn't say is that you also have to be physically fit. And I think I mentioned that in my opening statement. Yes, it's part of being certified.
Bill, Nick sent out a statement yesterday. You may be aware of what was said in it at the very end of it. I just wanted to give you a chance to respond to what he said. He said, I did not play a role in either of the DA's campaigns. He should remove himself from mine.
Well, I want to speak to that. I'm glad that you asked that. I think it shows the alternate reality that the sheriff is in. First of all, we had a statement yesterday from the National Association of SRO chairman that said this was shocking, what's going on. Second of all, the Department of Justice from Washington has been involved from the moment we asked them to step in. The FBI has been involved, okay? You've got at least 2 different occasions in which the sheriff has used lawfare against whistleblowers. One of which was Jim Brown in this case. You've got Montgomery coming in here, Mr. Benefield from A-Post. You've got the Attorney General's office coming in here. This isn't just Walker County. This isn't little DA, podunk DA, okay? This is the entire system. This is not a situation where somebody is supporting somebody in a local race. Quite frankly, you know, at this point, it's bigger. It's just like what Mr. Benefield said. It's about doing the right thing. It's about getting out here and making sure that school kids have the best we can put in there. If we have to give up making a couple of drug cases to be on social media, I think it's more important for us to have people in the school systems that are the best we can put in there. That's what it's about.
Early on, you referenced your office investigating the aftermath of Tony Mitchell's death. Could you go into more detail about what caused your office to reach out and get more departments involved and what you were up against in terms of not getting certain things?
Jennifer, probably the answer to that is no, I can't. I tried to make my words very careful there. It was our feelings when we started the investigation of the wrongful death of Tony Mitchell that we would be better served and the people of our community would be better served if we called and asked for some additional manpower and resources, which we did. And I want to make this real clear. I fully support, I mean, I'm a Republican, but I fully support what the Department of Justice is doing in this case. And I think it's needed, and I have made that very plain and clear in my discussions with the Department of Justice.
In light of the Tony Mitchell case and the recent cases, do you believe Sheriff Smith should resign?
Leave that up to Mr. Smith.
So do you feel like Jim Brown was correct in being able to go back and investigate Nathan Powell in terms of his?
I think within the law, the letter of the law, I think he was. I think he was justified. There's a exception to using these computers dealing with legitimate law enforcement purposes, and I think bringing it to your attention of your superior about the issues with Mr. McDonald, I think it's very legitimate.
Was the certification, would there be a way in all this investigation and process that the sheriff and the chief deputy could lose their certification?
I think Mr. Benefield probably needs to speak to that. You want to speak to that?
Yeah, that was the last statement that I made concerning that this is an ongoing investigation. It's not closed. And they would be subject to possibly sanctions by the commission concerning the retention of their law enforcement certification. That hasn't been decided yet. It's always a possibility. I mean, this is early. The grand jury just reported the indictments, and the district attorney just announced them, and the sheriff and Chief Deputy Williams were arrested on warrants that were issued on these charges. Now, it'll go to the commission for them to decide whether or not there'll be a hearing concerning their retention of their certification or whether that certification will be revoked. So I can't say it will be or not right
These
now.
are misdemeanor charges, so he could not be removed if he was elected.
That's
Well, he could lose his certification, but that doesn't remove the sheriff. It does remove anyone else, from the chief deputy down, or any police chief, or law enforcement officer, state trooper, anybody else are required. It's just like a license for a doctor or a nurse or a lawyer to practice. You get licensed by that regulatory agency. That's what A-Post is. And you have to meet the training standards and the background. In 2024, the legislature passed an act, and it's Act 2024-268, that creates another database that's totally private, but it's for the management of law enforcement officers, investigations and things like this. And it requires mandatory investigations of backgrounds. It even requires a former employer to give that information to a prospective employer. And it grants some type of immunity for that employer to give that information provided it's truthful. And that's a big deal. So those steps have to be taken. You mentioned Deputy Brown. I don't know much about that except what I saw on television and what I saw in the videos, but I do know that he was assigned to the sheriff's office. He was an investigator, and he would have had access to look into background investigations on different people. That he could have that authority. Whether it was legal or not to fire him, I don't know anything about that. Do what?
Were any of these individuals who were acting as law enforcement but not APOs, were they given access to these same law enforcement only databases that
No.
Mr. Brown was accused of?
No, they don't have, no, they don't have access to the law enforcement database, or they're not supposed to. Let me put it that way. When we talk about law enforcement databases, I was talking about the 268 database. There are other databases that Brown used called LETs, NCIC, that are controlled by LEA and the CJIS that law enforcement has access to, restricted. And you have access to that with certain conditions so far as divulging of information and this kind of thing.
Are you aware of any other sheriffs in the state of Alabama that are not APO certified? You said that there's a chance the commission could decide to revoke his.
To my best memory today, every sheriff in the state of Alabama is APO certified. I remember when APOS was created by an act of the legislature in 1971, and some of these laws that the indictments stem from were adopted in 1971. That's why they're misdemeanors. The legislature just this year, in an act passed legislation and an act signed by Governor Ivey that takes effect October the 1st, would make all of this felony violations, a Class C felony.
Just to be clear, both Nick Smith and Ralph Williams, both of them, there is the possibility that the commission could decide to hold a hearing on the retention of their APO certification.
That's correct.
For both individuals.
And, yeah. And see, the people that you're talking about that are not APO certified, that are working as law enforcement officers, we have no knowledge of them because they've not been employed or appointed as a law enforcement officer, and the sheriff's office didn't report them to us, so we had no way of knowing who they are. They're just a civilian that's working improperly as a law enforcement officer.
How scary is
They technically had no more authority than a private citizen.
How scary is that?
How scary is it? I think it's dangerous for the community. I think it's dangerous for our school system and our teachers. I mean, that's why you have a separate statute going beyond just the certification of law enforcement to be SROs. I haven't seen the video from the National NASRO, I think they call it, National Association of School Resource Officers, who just met this past week down in R&B, had a big conference there for state resource officers. But they were appalled. Frankly, I am too, that you would put a non-certified individual, not trained, doesn't know how to deal with irate individuals or active shooters. They've had none of that training. They're not certified. They're not you don't know if they're physically fit or mentally prepared, because if you're certified, you have to undergo a psychological evaluation. You have to undergo physical examinations, and then you have to pass the academy. And that academy is 560 hours today. It's 14 weeks long.
What's the line between what was happening here and impersonating a police officer?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear all of that.
What's the line that's between what was happening here, where a civilian was acting as a law enforcement officer, versus someone impersonating a police officer?
It won't be October 1st. Because that act specifically amends impersonation to include these situations.
Jennifer, the impersonation includes language called falsely pretend. That's the key words for that statute. I think that goes to the heart of whether or not the grand jury can find that somebody was pretending or not, because there was enough legitimization behind it that I don't know that you could have met that burden. With the new law that Governor Ivey and Mr. Benefield and APOST has pushed, it makes that a lot easier situation to step into as a prosecutor.
It's a clear line.
Yes.
Mr. Adair and I discussed impersonation as it currently exists. And I don't know what the grand jury thought or how they discussed it or what they did, but I do know in our discussions that it's very possible to believe that whoever was acting in that capacity was doing so at the direction of the sheriff. The sheriff said, "I appointed you, you go do this." Yes, sir.
In your career, sir, have you ever seen anything like this where you have a sheriff allegedly?
Yeah, I'm sorry, he didn't want.
Yeah, in your career, have you ever seen anything like this where you have a sheriff that's allegedly put non-certified folks in these positions in all of your years?
I've never seen anything that reaches to this extent. I've seen a lot in my career, and but to blatantly defy the law, to ignore the law, and without getting into anything about the investigation of the particulars of the charges, Walker County Sheriff's Office has a contract with the Walker County School System to provide SROs, almost $400,000 a year. So the school system's paying for these officers to be in the school, and I would think they would expect them to meet the requirements of the law, that a law enforcement officer, and if you're not certified, if you're not trained as a law, you're not a law enforcement officer, you're a civilian. I don't care. I use this sometimes when I get a question. Sometimes you'll have an agent that says, "Well, can I do this or can I do that?" I said, if it walks and quacks, it's not a goat. It's a duck. So if you have an individual that's dressed as a law enforcement officer, wearing the uniform of a law enforcement officer, whether it's a trooper or whether it's a police officer or deputy sheriff, and they hold themselves out as that, and they're armed, and they're driving patrol cars, and they're making arrests, wouldn't you believe that they were law enforcement? Wouldn't you expect your agency to make sure they were meeting the requirements of the law? I mean, it's been on the books for over 50 years.
One of y'all, I can't remember who had the question. We've got the chairman of APOST here. He has served 8 terms as sheriff of Tallapoosa County, and he's the chairman of the commission. So that ought to tell you how he came up here today to be here to make sure on the question that John had, that this is bigger than just a local situation.
Sheriff Abbott and I go back a long way. He's a former captain, was Alabama Bureau of Investigation, retired 30-something years ago, now that he's been the sheriff that long. And he served on the commission as chairman of the commission for more years than I can remember right now. But the Alabama Peace Officer Standards Training Commission is a professional organization. The members are professional law enforcement officers who've been around a long time, seen a lot, and are for one thing, and that's improving law enforcement and making sure that our law enforcement officers are eligible to be law enforcement officers, that they're properly trained, and that they follow the law and the rules. And when they don't, we remove that license.
Based on your individual capacity, do you think Nick Smith is fit to serve?
Well, the Walker County voters elected him sheriff, and I defer to what they say.
As an
I don't have a
officer
choice.
With the state APO certification to carry that.
Can he keep his APO
Do
certification?
you believe he's fit to keep that based on what you've seen in this investigation?
Well, that's a question for the commission to determine. I don't revoke. I issue the orders, but I don't revoke. And the commission will consider the facts, and if they deem it necessary that either one of these individuals need to be revoked or suspended, then they'll issue that order. I will tell you this, we've got a commission meeting later this month, and we already have like a dozen revocations on the docket, and we have, I don't know, 4 or 5 hearings if they don't get continuances or plead out on them. So, I mean, it's not, I mean, we do it, this is a regular function.
For Mr. Adair, do you know who's running the day-to-day operations over the sheriff's office? Nick Smith has not been there the past couple of days. Do you have concerns?
I don't know who's running the day-to-day operations. I sure hope that somebody that is as good at it is running it. I will say that I've had cases in which the last couple of years that have been very, very difficult to deal with concerning major cases, murders and child sex cases that have been very difficult to handle and have led to issues. So my hope is that things go well. My hope is not that things don't go well. My hope is they go well, because I'm the one that has to talk to victims out here about their cases. And, you know, that news is very difficult to give sometimes if things have not gone well. Let me get Ed. He's had a question, and he is my local guy.
I didn't want to skip past this too quickly, but I wanted to make sure you were saying in terms of the contempt motion that Nick has made a big deal about. He is saying that he'd already turned in material and am I understanding right that you're saying that all the material had not been turned in until the last minute, and that's when you filed the motion that he still had stuff that he still had to turn in?
Yes.
By the way, on top of everything else, when did we say that this case is going to go to trial? We determine that? Obviously, the first thing that'll happen, our local judges will have to make some determinations into what they have whether they want to keep the case. I have to watch my words there as well. And they'll have to make that decision. If they all recuse, which sometimes in the past that's happened, then there'll be a judge to have to be appointed by AOC, which is the Administrative Office of Courts. And the judge would then have to come up and then go through, you know, the preparatory things to get a case moving. Since you mentioned some other problems, Judge Aldridge released orders recently that indicated that remote hearings and problems that were not being addressed by the sheriff, and that law enforcement was not showing up for cases in general. Do you feel that these problems in the sheriff's department are dragging down the local legal process?
I think that there are several issues going on at once. And the answer to one of them doesn't necessarily mean it answers all of the problems, okay? Obviously, there are numerous cases that have had to be dismissed because of failure of the complainants to show up. But there may be some other reasons to give the benefit of the doubt in situations, dealing with overtime and things of that nature. I'm not going to sit here and castigate you know, the sheriff's office for that, because there are issues with people numerous times having to come to court and it being difficult to be there because of overtime issues. But let me say this, and I'm saying that to my police officer folks that are over here, that if you make a case and you're willing to put somebody in jail, then whether you get paid or not, you need to show your butt up to court, okay?
Is there, on the street, we talk about this, people talk about it to me. Can you comment about the culture of operation at the sheriff's department in terms of how it operates and its viewpoint of things and whether it needs correction?
I have a lot of thoughts on that, Ed, but I'm going to just say that I'm going to leave that up to, again, there's ongoing investigations federally that are still ongoing. And there's been several things publicly put out there. And I'm not going to really elaborate on that. You know, I believe that in my line of work, so much of what we do is dependent upon good law enforcement work. You know, I led off this by saying that we don't go on a good old boy system here, regardless of what a lot of the people out in our county say. If something looks to be criminal, we immediately get agencies involved that need to get involved. If there are conflicts of interest on something happens in the city of Jasper or with Carbon Hill or whichever community it is, then we reach out to ABI or we reach out to another law enforcement officials from other locations to come in and investigate. And everything that y'all have read about and everything that y'all have seen out there that looks to be some sort of criminal situation, I am telling you that we have reached out and there are appropriate agencies that are looking into the matters, including professional responsibility organizations.
Do you think that there will be action, based on your communications, is there any potential action expected later this year concerning the sheriff, or could there be indictments?
I can't speak to that. I can say that in this situation that DOJ had full and complete knowledge of what we were doing, and we have been in partnership and cooperation with them on different matters, and we will continue to do what we've been asked to do. And I would just say for everybody here that I feel very good as a prosecutor, as a citizen of our community, that there are systems out there that look into these kinds of things and take it very, very seriously. I feel better overall, and I hope that we don't see these kinds of things shut down or ended, because I think things like this are important, because there are difficulties on a local level in investigating certain things.
Tony Mitchell's family has said all along, no one from the county has reached out to them to apologize or anything. Would you like to make a statement to them at this point?
Well, obviously, dealing with the death of a loved one is traumatic. I mean, it's terrible. You know, I've had to do that, and at the time that it happened with my father, I actually was on the phone with the sheriff, and he wouldn't say anything to me because he was sitting there looking at my father's dead body, and he couldn't say anything to me over the phone. So there are times where you can speak real freely with families, and there are times when it's difficult to do. I can't speak to what the sheriff's office has done or what other law enforcement agencies have done. I do know that the federal government does have crime victim specialists that help, and I'm aware that they have brought all those resources to bear in this situation. Yes, ma'am.
Is there the possibility that if the sheriff is found guilty of the 6 charges, I know they're misdemeanors, but is it possible he could serve jail time?
My interpretation of the law is that this is a Class C misdemeanor, carries up to 90 days for each count and up to a $500 fine.
Do you know if Walker County Schools will attempt to recoup some of that money they pay for SROs? Are you involved in any process like that?
I can tell you that I've had conversations with the Walker County School Board. I know that doesn't really answer your question, but that's all I can say.
Do other school systems routinely inquire with APOS to get verification that their SROs are actually APOS certified?
I'm sure they rely on their local law enforcement agency that's providing the school resource officers. In this case, I believe that contract paid the money to the Walker County Commission, but the sheriff provided the SROs, and how that worked, I don't know, but that's generally the case. The school system doesn't always hire the individual as an SRO. They've got to be a law enforcement officer, and they rely on their local agency to provide that SRO. They pay for them, and they pay the city or the county, but that's how that works across the state.
In this situation, again, I can't really go into the facts, but Commission acted more of a conduit.
Right, I know the grand jury recommended that, I guess, that the Board of Education take a more active role in ensuring that who's being sent there is APOS certified. You know, on one hand, I think that most Board of Education would think they could trust their sheriff to follow the law and do that. But now it makes me wonder, are other Board of Educations, I mean, is that common that they are verifying, getting verification? Because you can't get online and verify.
That might be something you need to ask the Board of Education.
But you can file a request for information, what we call an RFI-1, that any citizen can file with the commission. And you can do it electronically through our website. And you can find out if that person is certified or not. You're not going to find out anything else. But an employing agency or that's investigating an individual for employment as a law enforcement officer or has a criminal case that's going, there's another mechanism for that agency to get information from us. But if the school board felt the necessity to check behind their law enforcement agency, they can file a RFI with us and they can find out if that person is in the system.
I want to say one last thing, and then I'm going to call the end to it if y'all don't mind. Kathy Stewart and Sue Peoples, I'd introduced Kathy earlier as a lead investigator. Both of them are the investigators for APOS, and they have spent several months in Walker County and talking, and I want to thank them personally for, they actually started this investigation, like Mr. Benfield said. I didn't even know they were in Walker County when they started this investigation, but they spent a lot of time up here, and they've gotten to see all of the good and the bad from our community. So I want to thank them personally for what they've done. Thank y'all.
Quick question, Mr. Neville. His title, he's the Executive Secretary of the APOS Commission.
Yeah, he's the director. Not, you're talking about Mr. Benefield, right?
Yeah, the one that
I think
talks-
he's the director.
I thought he said Executive Secretary.